If you've been around for a while, then you know how much I care about financial freedom for all. One thing that often gets in the way of that is debt. That's why I'm happy to announce that I've partnered with an amazing organization called Juno. Juno helps you get lower interest rates by using the power of group negotiation. It is a completely free resource that you can use to secure lower interest rates on new and existing student loans. Head to the link in the episode show notes to find out more. This is the Dreamers Podcast, episode 46. Today is November 30th, 2021. My views on generational wealth and why, for me, my goal is really to work on building the wealth, but as much as I can, not leave an inheritance to my kids. Now, that doesn't mean that I want them to have a harder life than me, not at all. But my goal is really to help them while I'm here in various ways, right? And that's building wealth, transitioning the wealth while I'm here, serve as a guide to help them build more wealth, investing in them, and so much more. And to get back to what happened earlier this year, with my father's passing, I received an inheritance. And that's something that is definitely not common in the Black community. That's something that I don't take for granted, something that I'm truly grateful for. But today I want to talk about the downside of that.
Hello world, welcome to the Dreamers Podcast. I am Stephanie Anne-Lyse, also known as Anne-Lyse Wealth. I am a financial coach and an author. I self-published my first book, Dream of Legacy, a guide to help dreamers reach financial independence and build generational wealth. In this podcast, I'll have conversations with experts and thought leaders who dare to follow their dreams. You'll hear about their journey and their money stories. I hope it inspires you, dreamers out there, to live life on your own terms.
Come on, dreamers, let's change the world!
This podcast is brought to you by Dream of Legacy. Check out dreamoflegacy.com for resources to assist you on your journey to financial independence. Before we get into today's episode, please take a couple minutes to go into Apple Podcasts, if you're listening from an Apple device, to rate and review the podcast. If you appreciate the free resources that are provided in this podcast, then the best way to let me know is to do just that. Reviews help the podcast be more visible, and it helps other dreamers discover the podcast. So thank you. I appreciate you. And now let's get back to today's episode.
Hello, welcome to the Dreamers Podcast. I'm your host, Anne-Lyse Wealth, and I'm so happy that you've decided to join me for today's episode of the podcast. I'm recording this episode Thanksgiving week, which has led me to really think about what I'm thankful for this year. And I'm thankful for a lot of things. One of them is having this podcast. But when it comes to personal finance, one of the things that I'm really grateful for is just for having the financial education. And I'll share more in a little bit. But if you've been listening for this podcast for a while, if you've read my book, Dream of Legacy, Raising Strong and Financially Secure Black Kids, if you read some of the articles that I've written on my website or for different publications, then you know that I'm really big on the topic of generational wealth, and particularly generational wealth in the Black community, because it's something that is very rare. And I was drawn to this topic when I discovered a study by the Institute for Policy Studies saying that by year 2053, the median Black wealth is expected to go down to zero. And that study has led me to research the topic of generational wealth, eventually to write my first book and to start this journey as a personal finance educator. But I truly think that everything happens in divine timing. As I see the way my life has unfolded this past year, I believe that I was just preparing for the next stage of my life, which is actually
being tested when it comes to that same topic that I've been researching, writing, and been passionate about, which is generational wealth. I recently wrote a piece for Business Insider about it, and I opened up and talked about my specific experience when it comes to that. I have been a big advocate, when it comes to not just building wealth, but taking the time to educate our kids so that they actually are prepared to receive the wealth and continue to expand on it as opposed to blowing through it, quote unquote, like most families do. And so I've shared my journey on this podcast before. I quit my job after reaching coast fire, which is the point where you have enough money invested so that you don't have to contribute anymore towards your retirement, and your retirement is covered. And so at that point, I decided to make a change in my life and focus on work that light me up, which is what I've been doing for the past 2 years. I'm still investing, still contributing towards retirement, but it's good to know that you have reached a milestone that can help you not worry as much. Now, what I was not prepared for is what happened a few months ago, which is my father passing unexpectedly. And I know I've shared this on the podcast before, but as you can imagine, it had a huge impact on my life. He was such an important figure in my life. And it's something that my family is still adjusting to. But to bring it back to today's topic, I want to talk about my views on generational wealth and why, for me, my goal is really to work on building the wealth, but as much as I can, not leave an inheritance to my kids. Now, that doesn't mean that I want them to have a harder life than me, not at all. But my goal is really to help them while I'm here in various ways, right? And that's building wealth, transitioning the wealth while I'm here, serve as a guide to help them build more wealth, investing in them, and so much more. If you're curious to hear more about my perspective on this, I will link in the show notes various articles that I wrote. And to get back to what happened earlier this year, with my father's passing, I received an inheritance. And that's something that is definitely not common in the Black community. That's something that I don't take for granted, something that I'm truly grateful for. But today I want to talk about the downside of that. And I don't know if everybody who has received an inheritance feels this way, but for me, just the reminder of why I have received the inheritance in the first place has been painful. Knowing that if the person had not died, then you wouldn't have received it. That's one of the reasons why I also want to do something different for my children so that they don't have to experience this. But one thing I want to talk about, though, is as a CPA, a personal finance educator who has been talking about this for so long, I cannot express how unprepared I felt. When you know the statistics, when you know that 70% of families lose their wealth by the second generation, 90% by the third. So, to be honest, I have been pretending that it didn't exist, because it was painful to think about why it existed in the first place. And I feel a lot of pressure to do it right. So it's something that has been on my heart for a while. And I just felt like sharing because it's definitely something that's not common in our community. And I wanted to tell everybody out there that's working on that, on building the generational wealth, just make sure that you have a plan to educate your kids. Because I've been thinking about, okay, so if I feel this unprepared, then how does someone without financial education, without all of the knowledge that I've acquired or accumulated over the years, how do they feel when they get an inheritance? So it's so important to really think about how you are going to prepare your children for that next step. So if you want to find out more about my views on this topic and why I'm choosing a different approach, which is not to leave an inheritance, I invite you to look at the show notes and you'll find out more about my strategy, which I hope is going to make it easier for my kids. But yeah, I feel the pressure to deliver, and I will definitely keep you updated on this. I just had it on my heart to come out here and talk about some of the things that we don't necessarily think about when we're so focused on building the wealth. All right. Today's episode is a very short one. I hope you enjoyed it, and I can't wait to see you back here next week. Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Dreamers podcast. You can find the episode show notes and all of the links mentioned at dreamoflegacy.com. If you liked today's episode, here's what you can do to support me and help more dreamers discover the podcast. Follow the podcast on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. Rate and review the podcast to help the podcast gain more visibility. Share the podcast with your family, friends, and coworkers. And if you really enjoyed today's episode, please take a second to tag me at thedreamers.podcast on Instagram and let me know what you liked about today's episode. All right, dreamers, that's it for today. I will see you back here next week for another episode of the Dreamers podcast.
Okay, dreamers, time to build this legacy.
This podcast is for general information purposes only. It is not intended to provide any tax, legal, financial planning, insurance, accounting, investment, or any other kind of professional advice or services. Please consult with an appropriate tax, financial, or legal professional to receive appropriate advice based on your situation.
Sunday, Skincare Day, is one of the ways I keep my sanity in these crazy times. Dreamino is an all-natural, Black-owned skincare brand carefully handcrafted by parents who could not find the proper care solutions to address their family skin problems. All Dreamino products are made of organic and high-quality ingredients, meticulously chosen to give your skin the smooth results and the glow it deserves.